Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to the BFS Fishing Channel. And in this video, we're going to be going ahead and tearing down the Kastking Zephyr BFS reel. You can already see that I've already gone ahead and done one quick modification. So what this is basically a Gomexus handle. And in upgrading or replacing the handle, I've actually already gone ahead and upgraded this reel from a 6+1 ball bearing reel to a 10+1 ball bearing reel. So there are 4 ball bearings in the handle. It's fairly cheap. I think it's like 15 bucks. I think I'll try to leave a link in the description below if you guys are interested. I think it comes in a couple of different colors. I got the clear one. And I want to be clear that Gomexus did send me this handle for free to show you guys the product. So, you know, the handle knobs themselves are very kind of tacky almost. I'm not really sure what material this is. It doesn't really feel like a silicone, but it might be some sort of kind of like coated rubber texture, but it feels very tactile. It feels very non-slip. There is no play at all. So it's shimmed very, very well. And it doesn't spin for the longest, but you know, on handle knobs, you don't really need it to spin for a long time. You just need it to be shimmed really well. There's nothing like holding a handle knob that like moves back and forth to make you feel like the reel is about to fall apart. Yeah, so anyways, let me give you guys some close-ups of the handle itself. And you can see that the knobs themselves are kind of this like contoured grip, which I really like because it just makes holding the knob very easy and very comfortable. Okay, so we're going to be doing the teardown on this reel, and let's just go ahead and get started. Before we do, I'm going to go ahead and glove up. I haven't been gloving up in the past, and I think I will do that moving forward because I don't like having all of this grease and oil on my hands, and it's actually not really good for you to be touching these greases. Maybe in like small quantities it's fine, but you know, I'm tearing down reels constantly, so I just want to do my best to kind of protect myself. Anyways, it's all right. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and remove the handle, and this would be the same thing if you are doing this with your stock handle. So you're just going to be using I think it's going to be a 10 millimeter. I'm not 100% sure, but you can go ahead and check the size. Yeah, it's going to be a 10 millimeter. And I recommend using a 6-sided wrench if you have one. A 12-sided wrench, it may run the risk of kind of stripping the sides and kind of marring the sides of your nuts, which, you know, most people like to see these for aesthetics. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put that aside, and then we're going to go ahead and take off the handle. So I'll set that aside there. First thing that comes off is going to be the star drag, and this has the clicker, I believe. Yeah, I think on mine I may have actually lost I actually took this apart once and I went ahead and lost. There's a little spring and a ball detent that sit right there, and they kind of interact with this this plate. I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's little tiny divots, and that's what causes that clicking sound. So pro tip, don't lose that, because if you lose it, it's not easy to find. Very small piece. Okay, next up is going to be a little spring, and that's going to sit inside this. This nut has like a little seat in it specifically made for that spring. So just make sure that when you put this back on, the seat is facing outwards. So we're going to go ahead and take that off, and I like to hold my thumb on the spool and to loosen it. Now if you have a left hand reel, you're going to be righty loosey, lefty tighty. If you've got a right hand reel, then you're obviously lefty loosey, righty tighty. So we're going to go ahead and take that off. To help yourself with this part, you can loosen your star drag all the way. Next up, prior to taking off your handle, I mean. Next up, we've got a flat washer, which is not sided. I'm going to go ahead and set that there. And then we've got 2 keyed washers, which it looks like for some reason these were put together the same way. And I'm going to go ahead and flip them. These typically should be opposing each other, kind of like that. I don't know if you guys can see it, but you want them opposing each other so that they can kind of crush down and they act as springs, hence the name spring washer. And then we've got two other washers. We've got a thicker one, which does not look sighted on this reel, and then there's going to be a thinner washer, so just like that. All right, and then once we've done that, we can actually start looking to take off the side plate. But before we do, I'm just going to go ahead and take out the spool, and we can take a look at the bearing size, which, you know, it's a fairly common bearing size, and I think plenty of people have already done upgrade videos on these spool bearings. But we'll take measurements for due diligence. I like to have a nice pair of forceps or tweezers, whatever you're comfortable with using. And then I've got a new tool, this Roro Bearing puller, which has been really useful actually. So all you do with this one is you just, let me show you that again. So there are these rounded sides right here and right here. And all you do is you find the right diameter that's going to fit in here. You gently push down without too much force, and then it'll pop the bearing out. But as you can see, my hand or my glove has some oil on it already, which I don't really like dealing with. Anyways, so let's get a bearing size. So let's go ahead and zero out my calipers. Inner diameter is going to be a 2.8, so that's going to be a 3. The outer diameter is going to be a 10. And then the width is going to be a 4. So I'll go ahead and put the sizes for these bearings in the description down below, and then links to upgrade parts for those if you want to buy them. But most people have already, you know, done that already. So that's the side plate, and I'm going to set aside the spool. But before we do that, we'll get a size on this spool bearing. So if you guys have never used one of these spool pin removal tools, what you do is you do your best to kind of line up everything perfectly straight. If it's not straight, then you're going to be potentially bending the spool pin itself. Also, sometimes these spool pins are directional in the way that they actually go into the spool shaft. And so if you encounter too much resistance, you kind of want to stop and then back off. But it seems like I'm getting the equal amount of pressure on both sides for this one. So I'm just going to go ahead and see if we can't manhandle this one all the way through. All right, so this one looks like it's out. And because there's a lot of grease. So this is one of the reasons why I suggest people, you know, tear down their reels and kind of clean them out prior to using them, is because they're just so greasy from the factory. Sometimes you'll get like a really dry reel, and sometimes you'll get the most greased reel in the history of mankind. All right, so for the spool bearing itself, inner diameter is going to be a 4.88, which is basically a 5. Outer diameter is going to be a 10 or a 9.9. And then the width of the bearing is going to be a 3.99 or 4. So I'll have that size in the description below as well. I'm going to set the spool aside right here, and then we're going to go ahead and get into the reel itself. So all you need for getting into the reel is going to be a Phillips, and I'm using a Wiha. I don't know the size of this one actually. I'll put the sizes down below as well in the description. If you're tearing down reels regularly, I do suggest that you get a pretty nice set of screwdrivers, precision screwdrivers. But you know, if you're just doing it as a hobby and you're doing it every once in a while for your own personal reels, then there's nothing wrong with using, you know, an Amazon kit like this. And these are very inexpensive. You just need to know when to kind of stop to prevent stripping of screw heads, because A lot of times, you know, depending on the quality of the screwdriver kit, the screwdriver bits will actually be very poor quality, and they'll allow you to slip when the screwdriver is actually contacting the screw head itself. Sometimes it's actually a case of, you know, just using the wrong bit altogether. So it looks like that's going to be all of the screws holding this in place. Nope, there's one more hiding right behind the clutch button. We're going to go ahead and get that out. And I think this is the only one that is a different size. They are all Phillips though. Small one, this silver one goes on the inside right here. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Hopefully you do. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this side plate off. All right, so taking a look at the inside, it's actually not too bad, but you can see where it's like really shiny. I'm assuming that's from either oil or the grease kind of, you know, melting away. Or maybe it's not grease. Actually, that's not grease. That is paint overspray. Not as bad, but you know, you'd like to see them do better with that. Anyways, this is going to be a shaftless spool design, so that you can see the spool tension shaft right there, and this one does have a fair bit of grease on it. I'm going to go ahead and set the side plate aside. One thing that I just noticed right now is that the anti-reverse clutch has already come out. So it has not stayed press fit into the side plate. I'm not super happy about that because usually anti-reverse clutch bearings, clutch roller bearings that stay inside the side plate mean that the tolerances are going to be pretty good. But it looks like this one did not. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the handle bearing. And we'll go ahead and set that aside. And then I'm going to take out the anti-reverse clutch roller bearing, and the sleeve is going to come with it, it looks like. And then we're going to put that back into the side plate just for safekeeping, and because later on it is easier to install that way. So I'm going to push the sleeve out. So if you can see, the sleeve is still in there. Go ahead and push that out through the bottom. We'll set that down on the table. And then it's important to keep the orientation correct because they only roll, these anti-reverse clutch roller bearings only allow your handle to rotate one way. So if you put your reel back together and you notice that the handle isn't rotating the right way, you know it's because you installed your anti-reverse clutch roller bearing incorrectly. It just needs to be installed the opposite way. Okay. So I probably should have used my little iFixit magnetic mat, but I wasn't thinking about this and I was just trying to get things going. So through magic, we're going to be right back. And we're back. Okay. So the next part to remove, I'm going to go ahead and take out these clutch springs. And they're pretty caked in grease, so I'm glad I got this out. I'm going to put the sleeve over here. That's going to be important for when you reassemble, because you want to put the sleeve onto the main shaft and then reassemble the side plate. So the next step is going to be to go ahead and remove the main gear. And we're going to do that by gently lifting directly up. You don't want to have the reel at an angle or anything like that because things may fall apart. In this case, it looks like we've got a pretty complex looking drag clicker. Yeah, this is one of those metal ones that uses the fingers and is kind of sandwiched, and it's going to have a bunch of Carbon-Tex drag washers inside of it. And looking underneath, there is one Carbon-Tex drag washer kind of stuck to the bottom, probably because it's greased. And we're just going to go ahead and leave that alone. And I'm going to go ahead and set this aside. This looks like an aluminum main gear. And it looks like it's pretty well greased. Maybe if I was doing a full maintenance on this, I would probably clean that off and then use my own grease of choice. And I'd probably clean up, and I'm going to go ahead and clean up some of the grease off of this pinion because you don't really need that much. Okay. So here's the pinion, and again, if you look, there is this plastic almost yoke-like piece, and what happens is this yoke is actually angled, and these angles kind of sit on this angled plastic piece. When you depress the clutch, it rotates that, but you kind of trap the pinion in place, and it causes the pinion to move up and down, or further out of the reel and then closer to the reel. And that engages the main gear and disengages the main gear. So I think I've shown this in the past, but right here, if I show you how it keeps it in place, but then it pushes it up just by the shape. So we're going to go ahead and put the pinion and the yoke there, and then we're going to get further into the reel. What I'm actually looking for is to see where all the bearings are. So I want to know if there's a worm gear bearing underneath this. I'm assuming that there's a main shaft bearing. There is a support bearing here for the pinion, which is great. And then also the pinion is supported by this spool tension bearing. So essentially that's basically what Shimano has and what Shimano calls X-ship. So that's great. All right, so the next step is going to be to go ahead and remove the main shaft assembly, and there's two screws, one right here and one right there, and they look to be Phillips as well. So we're going to go ahead and remove them one at a time. Also notice that this plate actually has a shape, and this has a little finger right here that will prevent a shaft right here on the line guide from falling out. So I'll show you that in a second. Go ahead and remove one screw. And then we get to the other one. This main shaft is actually also, looks to be aluminum, and it's also ported, which is kind of cool to see. And so then you just pull up, and then this should have like an O-ring. Well, not all of them do, but some of the better ones do. And it looks like on this, there are actually two of these little tabs or fingers that kind of prevent two of these shafts from falling out. And I'll show you that in a second, but this is the main shaft assembly. We're gonna go ahead and set that aside right here. And then to get to the worm gear, which I think is going to be a bushing, unfortunately, but we'll see. All right, so we have to get into this side. We have to take off this front piece, and it looks like they're holding it in place with a screw, which is another Phillips. So we'll go ahead and remove that. And then it looks like this is just clipped on. Yeah, so you can just unhook it because it clips in right there. Just pull away and then push forward. And then the other side, you should be able to do the same. Yeah. So it's just kind of held in place, and then the screw right there just kind of secures everything together. Okay, so this is, next part is probably the most complex part because it deals with a C-clip, and you can see the C-clip right here. And so you need to have something that can allow you to push the C-clip away from the opening of the C-clip, and then you can kind of get in there. So some people like using flatheads if the flathead is big enough. But actually what I found is this security bit, and I'll have to find the name of this because it's been really useful for these real C-clips. And one of the reasons to get one of these inexpensive kits, because some of them do come with this security bit. But anyways, what I like to do is I like to use these two little prongs to push on the open end. And I like to keep my thumb kind of in place just in case that C-clip is gonna, shoot off into oblivion. Because if you lose that C-clip, then your reel is going to be temporarily disabled. Okay, so pretty easy to get that off. And then you want to be sure that you're careful not to lose that C-clip. It is not directional. And the other nice thing is that these are usually magnetized heads, and so they'll, you know, keep in place anything there. Okay, so once you've done that, the other side, it should just pop out. So if you see here, you can already see that there is a pin right here that can move freely, and then there is a matching recess in the worm gear that it can sit down into. So if I push on this side, you'll see that that actually just pops out. And then you can, if you really wanted to, you can remove the whole thing. But you can see there that there is a bushing in place. And so we are going to go ahead and remove this entire worm shaft. Looks like I'm going to have to remove the pawl. This is the pawl, and this what it does is it allows the line guide to move back and forth along the worm shaft itself. And I'll show you in just a second how that works. Okay, so this is the pawl cap, and it just screwed on. And you saw that I was able to do that, unscrew it with just my fingers. Let's see if this will be magnetized. Nope. So sometimes it won't come out because there might be some grease in there, which is okay. There should be. Okay, so the pawl came out, and this is what a pawl looks like. So if you guys can see that, it's really hard to hold small objects with these gloves because you can't really feel much of anything. You can see that there's kind of like a semicircle or a half circle kind of cut out. What that does is it interacts with the worm shaft, and so it'll ride along these little grooves, and it'll go one way and then it'll go the other way, and then it'll go one way and then it'll go the other way. And so that's kind of the job and the purpose of the pawl. Okay, so for this, what we're going to do is we're going to pop off this little pin here, and this is so greasy. I'm glad I'm wearing gloves. We're going to take off the worm gear, and if you do take this off, this is directional. So it has a flat side right here, and then it has a side with a little raised lip. That raised lip actually goes in towards the bushing, which at some point we're going to change that to a bearing, and that'll be make this a 11+1 ball bearing reel. So we're going to go ahead and take that off. I'm going to take the bushing off, and we're going to get a size on that. Go ahead and put that down. And I just want to see. Nope, doesn't look like it's possible. So the most that we can make this is an 11+1 ball bearing reel, and that's fine. The worm gear bearing actually doesn't do anything to improve the performance. What it does do is it improves the feel of the retrieve. So it makes it so that the handle rotation takes a lot less energy. There's less friction there. So it just feels a lot smoother and a lot nicer. I'm gonna wipe off my gloves real quick. Okay, so let's get a size on this, and it looks like if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be a 4 inner diameter, and then it's going to be a 7 outer diameter, and then I think a 2.5. I mean, it's 2.5, yeah. So it's going to be a 4 inner diameter, a 7 outer diameter, and a 2.5. So it's a pretty common worm gear bearing size. I wonder if I have one. This is one of my bags of parts, which is now kind of gross, but look at that, I do have one. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace this right now. Let's see if this bearing is any good. Not the best, but you know what, that's okay. It's a bearing instead of a bushing, and that's really what matters. I'm also going to go ahead and give this worm shaft a bit of a wipe. These guys really like to over grease, and that's okay because they're kind of shooting for longevity. Okay, so now that we've got the bearing installed on there, what we're going to do is we're just going to put this in ever so gently, and then we're going to trap this worm gear and worm shaft. And the way that we're going to do that is we need the worm shaft to kind of be sticking out quite a bit. So you can use your thumb or finger to kind of hold it in place. You take your worm gear and you push it with the raised side in towards the center of the reel, push it all the way down past that little hole where you can actually then use the little pin and then insert it in. And then you're going to go ahead and make it so that it is equal distances on both sides, or equal lengths. And then once you have that, you can match a recess, pull it up on that part, and then using your finger to kind of cover that side, make sure the bearing seats, and then you're going to use your pointer finger to hold this side now, flip it over, and then we're going to have to go ahead and seat our C-clip, if I can pick it up with these gloves. And then in order to reseat the C-clip, don't use the security bit, which I'll get you guys the information on that, but you can use a flathead. So this is another reason to have one of these, inexpensive kind of handy micro precision, kits from Amazon. You take the flat side of it and then you push down so that the opening of the C-clip will eventually seat. This guy doesn't want to work with me. So almost there. All right, so that is seated, and then you can check to make sure that the worm shaft is not moving anywhere. And then once you've done that, the line guide is free to kind of move anywhere you want it to move. So you take the pawl and then you insert it with the semicircle side down towards the back of the reel. And if you can see here, it's not fully seated, so you just kind of let it move around a little bit and then it will pop back in. Once it pops back in, you'll notice that the worm shaft will move, and then you can also move the line guide by moving the worm gear with one of your fingers. Okay, then you're going to go ahead and re-screw on the pawl cap, which be careful not to cross thread it. And this only needs to be, finger snug. It doesn't have to be super tight, especially because this one looks like it's like a nylon material. Okay, and then that's pretty much it. Now the reel, once it's fully assembled again, is going to be a 11+1 ball bearing reel. Yeah, I'm actually interested to see, if upgrading the spool bearings will increase the performance of the casting by kind of lowering that lure weight threshold. In my experience, I have found that this reel can cast down to 1 gram, but you can't cast very far, and the accuracy is terrible. So I think the ideal weight is around 2.5 grams, and your rod, of course, has to be able to cast those weights. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video, guys. If you liked this video, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those questions in the comments below. I'm going to go ahead and leave affiliate links to, whatever upgrade parts that I have here. Maybe the screwdriver kit, this Wiha kit, Roro bearing puller, things of that nature. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.